Well, good evening and welcome to Merit Watch tonight. Hope you're doing well wherever this finds you. My name is David Craig. We're going to go over several of the news that's happened today here for Canada and the world. And obviously a big one was Mark Carney. Prime Minister Mark Carney today has appointed and announced his cabinet, I believe, as they were sworn in. We're going to be going over that in depth with Brian Lilley here just in a couple moments as he gives us some of the insights of who these members are, what the numbers look like, also some of their history, and are they going to be able to achieve. But I want to open up by actually analyzing a couple of these people, because who your team members are very important, especially as a leader, especially as someone who is expected and entrusted to run a country. Now, you don't just do that on your own. If you ask yourself, say, who did you vote for? And let's say you thought you voted for Mark Carney. Unless you lived in his riding of Nepean, I'm going to tell you, you didn't vote for Mark Carney. You actually voted for a member of parliament that is in your residing area. It's really important for us to know who we vote for, because I know that a lot of Canadians think they voted for Mark Carney, although he's the leader, and maybe that might have influenced your decision. You actually placed a vote for someone else. It's very important for us to understand who those people are and who those people are who are appointed to cabinet as they represent major areas in our country that actually are involved with the decision-making, bringing forth ideas and direction that each of these ministries are going to go forward with. Mark Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney, cannot look at every single area in depth. No prime minister can, no leader of a country can. He has to entrust his team and appoint people who are competent, people who understand that area, and people who can actually grow and bring forth and move us forward in that. For example, the Minister of Transportation or Minister of Foreign Affairs, or there's a new one of Minister of AI, Artificial Intelligence. So we're going to analyze a number of these, but I wanted to make an important point that we need to understand who the members are of this team. And it's interesting to look through what has happened, because I do believe there's several messages that have been sent as we have been looking through this cabinet today. Is Mark Carney, he did go ahead and he appointed Natalie Provost, the cabinet minister, who has typically been an anti-gun advocate, saying that it's not a right, it is a privilege, and she's now appointed in a powerful position in cabinet. So you understand what some of these people might be bringing with their certain ideologies. As well, Mark Carney, I believe, reading through a number of these lists, I think there are a number of people in cabinet who have been appointed out of their depth. I think some of them will be incompetent in the specific areas that they're in. Not that they're incompetent individuals overall, but the areas that they're presiding over, they don't have an expertise in. For example, there was one from Evan Solomon. He's now Minister of Artificial Intelligence. Now, in the emerging sector of AI, of quantum computing, of all things that move our technological sector forward, this is an incredibly important position, because if you know anything about AI, anything about semiconductors, anything about technology, quantum computing, who the emerging companies are, who are the big players, this is an industry that has immense potential for trillions and trillions of dollars over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, even in the immediate future. And to have someone who might not know a lot about this area is not a good appointment, because this could be an area of our country in Canada that we foster, that we invest, and that we pour into, that could create amazing return for Canadians and for Canada, creating Canada to be a center, this technological center for the world. I believe we can do that, but you need to have the right people in place. So time's going to tell. My gut tells me that's not a great appointment, considering he's a former journalist and not necessarily heavily involved in the tech sector. A couple other ones that came up I thought was interesting was Gregor Robertson. He was a former mayor of Vancouver. During his tenure in Vancouver, housing increased, I know, almost 200%, I believe closer to 180%, and one of the most expensive markets in Canada, but also the world. He is now also the housing minister. So again, you got to ask yourself some of these questions. Is that a wise appointment? Is this someone who is going to be able to help bring down the cost of housing, or at least create more supply across Canada, bring ideas, bring things that are going to help shape this moving forward? One of the things I thought was interesting was Prime Minister Carney decided to keep on Stephen Gobert as culture minister. He was one of the architects of Bill C-11. I think that's very discouraging, to be honest, especially when it comes to Alberta and Western Canada, when it comes to the idea of green energy and promoting our own natural resources. I understand he's a culture minister, but there is still influence and there is still a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Influence is the right word. Influence behind who he is and his position that he holds. It's really interesting. François-Philippe Champagne is the new Minister of Finance, but as well does not have a great background in finance. So it's really important to understand these things. A couple other news pieces I wanted to highlight that what happened today is the Alberta court finds WestJet wrongfully terminated an unvaccinated employee during COVID. This actually might be, it says yesterday that the Alberta Court of Justice awarded severance to a former WestJet employee fired because she declined to take the vaccine. This decision may be the first in Canada to be a severance to be awarded to a non-unionized employee. So that's a big thing that's going to impact future decisions as well. Lots of news going on, but specifically wanted to focus on the cabinet because it's important to understand who these people are. We'll be back right after this break with Brian Lilley. Well, welcome back to Merit Watch tonight. I'm David Craig. I am happy to be joined by a friend who's been joining us quite regularly lately, Brian Lilley, who is with the Toronto Sun as well as a political commentator. Great to hear your thoughts. I want to dive right into a little bit of the news that has happened today with Prime Minister Mark Carney now announcing his new cabinet. We've seen a little bit of a shift from Justin Trudeau's cabinet into what Mark Carney is running with, as well some former ministers who were dropped, but also some newly elected MPs who have joined and have been elevated to different cabinet positions. Brian, before we get into the names, can you give us the numbers? How many are in? How many are out?
24 new people are in cabinet. I just want people to let that sink in. This is massive. He dropped 11 people. And so we're with secretaries of state and full cabinet ministers, we're just under 40, but 24 new people. I'm still Googling some of them to figure out who they are and why they're in cabinet and do they have any of the qualifications. So people like Bill Blair were dropped, and then people that you've never heard of are now in charge of major portfolios. We can get into that in a moment, but this is a major shakeup and clearly a sign that Mark Carney wanted to send the message that this is not the same cast of characters. There are some, but this is not the same cast of characters that ran the Trudeau government.
Well, Brian, I know for many people in Alberta, they're very interested to find out who is going to be sitting in what seat for the cabinet. Is there any appointments that should give Albertans worry or should give us hope for people who are looking for changes with how Mark Carney and his government handle Alberta's resources?
Both. So there's both hope and worry. Hope in that the new Minister of Energy and Natural Resources is a guy who comes from the business world. His name is Tim Hodgson, a longtime friend of Mark Carney. They worked together at various places, including they both had stints at Goldman Sachs, the international banking firm. Hodgson was an advisor to Mark Carney when he was governor of the Bank of Canada. He has extensive experience at the executive level in the private sector, sitting on boards, all kinds of, good, solid business experience. And so you might hope that that means they're going to take a more business approach towards the oil and gas sector, towards agriculture, towards the natural resources that Alberta, much of Western Canada, much of the country, quite frankly, relies upon. Jonathan Wilkinson was a true believer in Mark Carney's net zero vision. He was not the guy for the job, so Wilkinson's out. Tim Hodgson's in. I think, if you were to ask people in Alberta, either politically or in those sectors, they would say, we're hopeful, but let's wait and see. On the other side, Julie Desbruzen is the Liberal MP for Toronto Danforth. She's from the left wing of the Liberal Party. So the Environment Minister is now from downtown Toronto. And you can probably guess the types of positions that she's going to take. And that could really be a thorn in the side for the sectors that we were just talking about. Will she, ease anything on the oil and gas sector? Will she be stricter? What about the fertilizer issue, the methane emissions from fertilizer that they were so hot to trot about a year or two ago and then backed off in the face of pressure? Both of those things, it seems like a yin and a yang here, a blessing and a curse at the same time. And so really the best that I can tell you is stay tuned.
Well, Brian, I want to move to some of the areas that have been problematic for Justin Trudeau's government and his cabinet in the past. And there's been definitely some problematic issues. And I'm wondering if Mark Carney, with his appointments and some of the changes and positions that have been shifted around, will he solve some of these issues? For example, Sean Fraser at Justice. Do you think this is good or is this bad?
I don't see anything good about Sean Fraser going to justice. This is the guy who broke the immigration system, was a disaster at housing, and now he's going to be in charge of the justice file. And some people will say, yeah, but he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer in Calgary, no less. Yeah, he worked at Blake's in Calgary. He, had a specialization in access to information. That's not exactly criminal justice. And we've got a real problem with criminal justice. Violent crime is up. The bail system is broken. Is he going to do the hard work that every premier in the country, including New Democrats in BC and Manitoba, Liberals in Newfoundland, and conservative-leaning premiers elsewhere have all asked for, which is fix the revolving door bail system so that these guys who are doing home invasions and carjackings and violent crimes. And we've got a story on the front page of the Toronto Sun today. Violent sexual assault. Guys out on bail. Commits again. Like, these guys just keep getting out on bail. Will Sean Fraser do that? I don't see it. And that's a real problem. You need someone in there who knows the justice system. Sean Fraser represents the same riding that Peter MacKay did in Central Nova in Nova Scotia. Peter MacKay was a Crown prosecutor before he became a politician. Sean Fraser worked for a cup of coffee doing administrative legal work and now is in charge of Canada's justice system.
Well, Brian, I'm interested on your thoughts on Chrystia Freeland. Many people obviously know who she is as our former deputy prime minister. And just recently, as Mark Carney was sitting down with President Trump was going after Chrystia Freeland, and there was not a word from Mark Carney, which made me wonder, will she not be appointed to cabinet? Will she not be appointed to the team? But she's been moved in, she's still in cabinet, but she's been moved to a bit more of a subdued role. Can you tell us more about the significance of this appointment?
So she's staying in transportation, and it's interesting. Yesterday morning, and that's what Mark Carney had put her in his first cabinet, the 2-month cabinet that just expired with the new cabinet being sworn in today. So he kept her in after he won the leadership. And then yesterday, rumors started swirling that she may be out when the cabinet is revealed on Tuesday morning. And so all through the day, talking to different people, mostly Liberals, it was chatter after chatter about a diplomatic appointment. That Chrystia Freeland was going to resign as an MP and take a big appointment. And of course, there's no way that she could have gone to somewhere like Washington. Donald Trump even said he hated her while he was sitting next to Mark Carney last week. You've got the fact that she probably hates Donald Trump. So what are the big diplomatic posts? Was it going to be the United Nations in New York, the EU in Brussels, or London? And by the end of the day, lots of people were hearing that she's going to be in London. Turns out not true. Rumors and speculation abound at cabinet appointments. So she stays in transportation, which is a very important file, but it's not considered one of the top tier ones in Ottawa. In Washington, it is a top cabinet position. And right now, the American administration is dealing with revamping their air traffic control system, which is a disaster. And they're looking at perhaps adopting the Canadian model on that to update it. But so she's in charge of, air traffic control. She's in charge of cross-border transportation. She's in charge of the rail systems. Important job, but definitely a step down from Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
There is a new immigration minister, and her name is Lena Diab. What can you tell us about her?
She's one of the ones that you're going to be Googling, unless you're from Nova Scotia, which is where she hails from. And she was in provincial politics for many years before jumping to the federal level in 2021. She is a lawyer as well. Her parents were immigrants. I can't actually tell from her bio if it was her parents or grandparents were immigrants from Lebanon. It says she's the children of first-generation Canadians, so I would assume her parents immigrated from Lebanon. She has that family understanding of the system, but this is one of the systems that is really broken in Canada that needs fixing. So this is a big job. Is she up for doing it? She's never held a job this big before. We just saw a news report that 25,000 foreign students claimed asylum last year. That's a record number, and we're on track to beat it this year. We've got in Toronto 9,000, almost 10,000 people a night being housed in the shelter system, and half of them are asylum claimants. We're bringing in 58,000 people outside of those students I mentioned. 58,000 people last year showing up at our land crossings, our marine crossings, at our airports, and declaring asylum. That's a decent-sized city, 58,000 people. And on top of that, the full-time immigration system is broken. So this is a big job that's going to someone without much in the way of experience. To me, that's worrisome.
Well, Brian, Bill Blair was dropped from Defense Department, but also from Cabinet completely. David McGuinty, as was appointed, I know, joins Cabinet takes over as Defense Minister. And I know that he's well respected around Parliament Hill, but he only spent a couple of weeks there at Public Safety Minister. What does this tell us about the shifts that Mark Carney's making?
Well, as someone who has often fought, sometimes on live television, with Bill Blair, I'm not going to be sad at this one. Minister Blair and I don't know what it is. I appear to rub him the wrong way, and so he's out. But David McGuinty, I'm not going to. This is a good appointment. David McGuinty has been an MP for 21 years. He was a lawyer in real practice, unlike Sean Fraser. Before that, he is someone who knows his way around Parliament, knows how the system works. He chaired the Committee of Parliamentarians looking into national security issues, well respected. He's someone that if he'd been dropped from cabinet after only finally getting in Mark Carney's first cabinet of 2 months ago, I would have been disappointed. But this is a big step up to national defense, another area where we've got major problems. We've got a recruitment problem that needs fixed. There's the ongoing fallout of a couple of reports on sexual impropriety in the workplace within the Canadian Armed Forces. All of these things need fixed. David McGuinty, someone, despite not having that huge departmental role before, is someone that's been around long enough, knows how the system works, and I believe can get things done.
Melanie Joly has been replaced as the Foreign Affairs Minister by Anita Anand. Is this a significant shift? What are your thoughts?
It's an interesting shift because Joly goes over to industry, which had been, for many years, Francois-Philippe Champagne, who is Mark Carney's finance minister. In Ottawa, the people who run foreign affairs consider themselves the prince and princesses of the parliamentary or the Ottawa scene. They are it. They're the most important department in their view. So this is definitely a demotion for Melanie Joly. In terms of change in policy, probably not. Melanie Joly was taking Canada very clearly on one of the most important issues of the day, which is the war in the Middle East. She was taking Canada away from a position that was supportive of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, or at least neutral, to being supportive of Hamas in Gaza. Anita Anand is very much the same. She even gave speeches during the election campaign in her riding that said that she was moving in that direction. Mark Carney himself, I believe, even though he hasn't been as open about it, I think is headed in that direction. That is disturbing for me. On issues such as Ukraine, there won't be much of a difference. When it comes to the United States, hopefully she plays it slow and steady. We've got Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who's given that special charge of dealing with Canada-U.S. relations, so that's almost off and on's plate. So no change on Ukraine. Moving is towards Hamas and away from Israel in the war in the Middle East.
Well, the cost of housing and affordability across Canada was a big issue during the campaign, as we saw Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives running on this for a long time, even as opposition, the official opposition, they were making this a giant issue. But Mark Carney also picked up on this during his campaign and also in the promises that they have made with policies. But Prime Minister Mark Carney has appointed Gregor Robertson as the Minister of Housing. What does this tell us?
Now, he's the former mayor of Vancouver, who oversaw the housing prices in Vancouver skyrocket out of control. So I think he's sending the message that competence doesn't matter as much as celebrity, because he was a bit of a star celebrity candidate who did well for the Liberals in the Vancouver area, despite a dismal record. I don't think this is a good sign. The federal government has the least responsibility for housing. The most responsibility is with your local municipality, which Gregor Robertson was in charge of and was disastrous on. Then it's the provincial government. Then it's the federal government. But the federal government has been trying to flex muscle, exert more control, move things forward. Are we really going to trust a guy who was overseeing the doubling of housing prices in Vancouver? Apparently so. And again, so this whole cabinet, I can objectively look at and say, that's a good appointment, that's a bad appointment. This one falls squarely in the bad appointments category.
Well, Brian, thank you so much again for your thoughts and clarifying all the information that comes down with Mark Carney's new appointed cabinet. Appreciate your time as always. Brian Lilley with the Toronto Sun and political commentator. Well, welcome back to Merit Watch tonight. Really appreciated Brian's comments on expanding upon some of the cabinet ministers and some of his opinions. I'm interested, if you are watching us online and on YouTube, let us know, what do you think of some of the appointments that's been happening here as these people continue to move forward and govern our country and hopefully bring our country to a great place. We're going to have to definitely hold them to account. One thing I wanted to, just before close here, bring our attention to is President Donald Trump has been making his rounds. He is in Saudi Arabia right now, I know, going through a big conference talking about investment, working together. I know he came to trade deal with China. Actually, I should say it's a temporary relief for 90 days of reducing tariffs until they come to a final deal. He made a comment about Canada, about an earth-shattering news, and that's going to be news coming out shortly. Watch this clip.
I said before in our meeting with the new and very talented Prime Minister of Canada, that we have some very big announcement to make. It's not about trade, it's about something else, but it's going to be a truly earth-shattering and positive development for this country and for the people of this country, and that'll take place sometime within the next few days.
Now, I'm not sure about you, but that's a really interesting clip to me. He goes on to say it has nothing to do with trade. Now, President Donald Trump is known for wearing his heart on his sleeve. He speaks his mind. He's not afraid to state things as it is. And we got certain amount of news from when Prime Minister Mark Carney connected with President Donald Trump last week. But we only saw a little bit from when they had their public part of the meeting. We did not see the behind the scenes. And again, people can speculate. I've seen speculation about maybe less border patrol between Canada and the United States, whatever it might be. Donald Trump is stating that there is an earth-shattering announcement that is coming between Canada and the United States. I am very curious to find out what this is. We will be watching this and sticking with it as we move towards this announcement whenever it comes out, hopefully in the near future. But we'll stick on that. Thanks for watching Merit Watch tonight. My name is David Craig. Have a great evening.